Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Apocrypha Apocalypse. I'm Gary Machuda. And if you're really enjoying these videos on the channel where we dive in deep to the issue of the Old Testament canon and look at the Deuterocanonical books, which Protestants call Apocrypha, really ask the hard questions about whether these books are rightfully rejected by the Protestant reformers, please subscribe, like, ring the bell, tell your friends about it. And also, if you feel moved to support us on Patreon, we truly appreciate it because that enables us to buy resources to do further research, to do things like videos on the Deuterocanon. So today's topic is a very interesting one. In this series that we've been doing in regards to the rabbinic reception of the Deuterocanon, specifically the book of Ben Sirach, or the book of Sirach, which is one of the Deuterocanonical books that's rejected as Apocrypha in Protestant Bibles, we've been looking at evidence that, yes, indeed, it appears that Ben Sirach was accepted as sacred text by the rabbis, even being placed within the third division of the Hagiographa. And this goes against the standard narrative that you find out there. And in the last video, we quoted from Norm Geisler, who states categorically that the Jews never accepted these books, and they always rejected the Apocrypha. Well, we've shown evidence to the contrary. Well, what if there existed a rabbi within rabbinic literature who stated categorically that the book of Ben Sirach had never been considered sacred? Well, I think this would be the first text cited by any Protestant apologist against the Deuterocanon. Why? Because it would confirm what conservative Protestants argue, namely that the Old Testament canon was closed and fixed long before Jesus gets on the scene, and therefore he just simply ratifies an already accepted canonical tradition, and the rabbis after Jesus merely just confirm that same tradition. Well, there is no text like that, and you don't find it in standard defenses. However, we do find something that is very interesting, and that's what we're going to look at today. What if there is a text within rabbinic literature that speaks about the rabbis withdrawing the book of Sirach or Ben Sirach, that is rejecting it as sacred? Wouldn't that imply that perhaps there were rabbis and there were Jews who accepted Sirach as sacred scripture? And if this is true about post-Christian Judaism, it certainly opens the door that in the earlier stage, that the Jews may have also accepted Sirach as sacred scripture, certainly within the time of Jesus and the apostles. So that's what we're going to look at today. So fasten your seatbelts, because the Apocrypha Apocalypse is about to begin. Okay, so if we found a text within rabbinic literature that spoke of Sirach being withdrawn or removed, or its sacredness being canceled by the rabbis, that certainly calls into question that standard narrative of some very conservative Protestant scholars who suggest that the Old Testament canon was closed and fixed hundreds of years before the rabbis even come on the scene after Christianity. Well, the text in question is this, and this is found in the Sanhedrin 100b, according to the manuscript reading. Now here, I'm going to give you clips from a book because I want to be able to give you the Aramaic and also the English translation in as neutral of a translation as possible, even hostile in a way. And this quotation, these pictures, come from the book, The Canonization of Hebrew Scriptures, the Talmudic and Midrashic Evidence by Sid Z. Lyman. It's put out by Archon Books. And the pictures in question are found on page 94 and 95 of the book. And what concerns us is really the opening statement here. Now, this is according to the manuscript reading, which is very important. And that's why I'm reproducing Lyman for you, so you can see exactly what he's translating and why. So this says, according to the manuscript reading, Rabbi Joseph, who lived 290-320 AD, said, even though the rabbis withdrew the book of Ben Sirach, we expound or interpret all the good passages in it. And then he continues and he makes 3 quotations from the book of Sirach. So what does Sanhedrin 100b mean when it says that the rabbis withdrew Sirach? Well, the word translated withdrew is genaz, which usually refers to a book or a codex or a scroll or a manuscript that's no longer usable. So it's withdrawn from service and placed in a storehouse, which is called geniza. And it's left there so that it may naturally decay. And we see this throughout rabbinical writings, such as in Sephorim 5:14 and Sefer Torah 5:14 as well. But it's clear that Rabbi Joseph here is not speaking about the withdrawn as a sense of a manuscript being withdrawn from circulation. The meaning of genez, however, does not fit the context of Sanhedrin 100b. Rabbi Joseph was not referring to a particular scroll or manuscript, but to the text of Sirach itself. So if Sirach had been withdrawn in the sense of being taken out of circulation and left for decay, there wouldn't be a text for Rabbi Joseph to quote, obviously. So all the text of Sirach wasn't put into a geniza, okay? He has one in front of him and he quotes from it. And to show this, I give you a couple of examples here elsewhere in rabbinic literature where the same word is used for withdrawing books of the Proto-canon. Now, this is discussions about when some rabbis did not believe that certain proto-canonical books were sacred text. So in Shabbat 30b, it says the wise man desired to withdraw the book of Ecclesiastes because its language was often self-contradictory and contradicted the utterances of David. Now, obviously, the wise men were overturned, right? But nevertheless, notice that the book of Ecclesiastes was by some rabbis attempted to be withdrawn. In Shabbat 30b also, it says, some desired also to withdraw, again, that same word, the book of Proverbs because it contained internal contradictions. So again, we have that same word withdraw applied to Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. We also found in the both of Rabbi Nathan, in one, it says, at first, they said Proverbs, Canticles, and Ecclesiastes are apocryphal. This is a translation of Genuzim. They said they were parabolic writings and not of the Hagiographa. And it continues, until the men of the great synagogue came and explained them. So notice you have this idea of withdrawing Proverbs, Canticles, and Ecclesiastes. And they were also, notice they were not of the Hagiographa. The Hagiographa refers to the writings of the Ketuvim, the third division within the Rabbinic Bible. So clearly we see how this word withdrawn can be applied to text. It can be applied to text to determine whether they belong within the collection of sacred scripture, specifically in these cases, the third division of the Hagiographa. And notice also that although a text can be withdrawn by rabbinic authority, it can also be changed and it can be recognized as sacred text by rabbinic authority. So clearly it's talking about sacred scripture and whether or not there's a recognition that a certain book belongs in sacred scripture. Now, so clearly it's this latter meaning that fits the context of Rabbi Joseph in Sanhedrin 100b. Even though the rabbis had withdrawn their recognition of Sirach as a sacred text, Rabbi Joseph still feels there are good passages for exposition. So Rabbi Joseph's statement indicates that the removal of Sirach was a post-Christian rabbinic decision, which would make it in no way binding upon Christians. It also implies that pre-rabbinical recognition of Sirach as a sacred text, at least by some Jews, did exist. Otherwise, how could it be said to be withdrawn? In other words, how can you withdraw a text as being part of Scripture, as being sacred, if no one ever held that text to be sacred in the first place? I mean, obviously, there were Jews who accepted the sacredness of Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Proverbs, and so some tried to withdraw that recognition, but ultimately it was restored and the recognition was affirmed. So if what Rabbi Joseph says is true, it appears that the same thing is true for Sirach, that there were Jews who did accept it as sacred scripture, but upon rabbinic authority, now this is a post-Christian authority, Sirach was withdrawn. That recognition was withdrawn, and then it became known as a non-sacred text. So very intriguing passage. I don't think this is an airtight case, but nevertheless, I think this comports very well with what we saw in our previous video in terms of rabbis quoting Sirach formally with it is written, and the recognition that Sirach was part of the Hagiographa. Here, Rabbi Joseph, and this is a fairly late recognition that there was rabbinic decision that Sirach was not sacred, although Rabbi Joseph still wants to quote from it because he thinks there's lots of good things in it to say. So I'll just park it right here. Again, if you like this episode, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching the Apocrypha Apocalypse. Bye-bye, everyone.